Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to our Community Information Night on Leading Safe, Inclusive School Environments. I am Julie Crawford. I am the Chief of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Student Support. I'd like to welcome everyone who is here and also our viewers online. I'm going to have to be reminded tonight to try and speak slowly. The New York's going to come out as I get going. Before we start our program, we are going to practice what we preach and do a little connection activity before we hear from the superintendent to start us off. So at your table, we thought we had a particularly relevant... Sorry. Never fails that we practice to practice. There we go. Okay, so given certainly last week and what it still looks like outside, we thought just since we have some heavy content tonight, we'd start with a little bit of a warm-up and do some connection before content with a quick table talk. So for those at your table, if you all could, we're just going to take a few minutes and share what is your favorite snow day memory. So given our schedule last week, let's take a moment, if you would, and share with your table mates, what is your favorite snow day memory?
Try one more time. Yeah, okay.
All right, thank you. All done.
Sometimes it's harder when someone's really slow and you're like, you feel like I don't know what you're saying. Honestly, like I know it's hard when you start fast, but I'd rather them be too fast than too slow. Because if you can't get to the point, like I can't interpret if I can't get your point. If I don't know what you're saying, I can't say it. Like, and I can't interpret. You always like slow down.
It's harder for them to be consistent.
Yeah. Right.
We're in New York, Rockland County, near Westchester. Okay. I'm upstate from Syracuse. Okay, yeah, Rochester. Oh, very nice. Where? RAC. All right, Geneseo. Oh, and here's the clip. Thank you all so much for sharing. I already referenced my New York status, so I'll just say I'm an upstater, and I don't have a favorite snow day memory because in Syracuse, New York, you don't get snow days. Well, now they get ice days, but we didn't get any. Yes, very nice. So at this time, we're going to turn it over to our superintendent, who's going to lead us through just some welcoming comments and then also talk about what our plan for this evening is, okay? Dr. Drawn.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford, and thank you for all the staff who helped put this together. Thank you for our parents and our community members and our staff who are here with us tonight. And importantly, there are a lot of people watching. It is being live streamed. So tonight is a very important night for us. I want to just take a few moments to talk a little bit about our objectives and a little bit about why we're here tonight. One thing I think it's very important here that we all, obviously those of us who are here tonight, really are those who care deeply about this issue of making sure that we're doing everything possible to condemn and to address and to follow through with any type of behavior, words, comments that takes place in Arlington Public Schools, but also hopefully beyond that in our community. I know all of us that are here tonight are connected not just to the schools, but perhaps to the community at large. And this is a community issue that we have a lot of work to do. I think the whole issue of civil discourse, the whole issue of respecting one another's differences is something that we as a nation are really, really lacking in. What can we do, though, is focus on what can happen in our school system. And so we can't change the whole nation and what's going on, but what we can do is focus on when students come to school, when our staff come to work each and every day, what are some of the things that are very, very important that we must expect? And that is basic respect. That is the ability to feel safe, to feel heard, and to feel that it is a place of learning for everyone. And for our staff, that it's a place where they can come and work and support the students each and every day. Knowing that, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what are some of our efforts that we're doing to address that. We also want to talk about the fact that there is some data we're looking at that tells us very much that that's not happening in every case, in every school, in every classroom, and many times in our buildings and our grounds outside during lunch and hallways. We see through our data and the conversations that we have with students and staff, a lot of what happens in those unsupervised times during lunch, during transition periods, during after school, etc. So we want to talk a little bit tonight about what is that's happening, highlighting some of the practices we're doing, some of the ways that we all can make sure that we're reporting. It's very important that we know, one, what are the systems for reporting these types of things? And two, more importantly though, when they are reported, that we in the school system are doing everything to follow up and address those instances of concern. So it's a combination of being preventative, educating, learning, and understanding what it means to be respectful, to support differences of opinion, to support all of us. I mean, one thing about Arlington County that is our pride is our diversity. And yet, with that diversity comes the ability for us as educators to help our students see that as a pride, see that as a positive, see that as an opportunity for us to thrive and live as the large community that we are. Doesn't happen, though, in every instance in our case, and so we have much more work to do. We're also going to hear some student experiences, and then again talk about what our next steps are, and then hear from you what are some of the thoughts and processes and ideas you might have that we can better work together as a group. I do want to pause a moment and take a second here. If you all look at your tables, you have a QR code on your table. Tonight, this is an information night where we're sharing with you some of the things we're doing, some of the learnings, some of our areas we have to grow and next steps. But I'm going to take 2 minutes right now for many of you who may have specific individual stories of a situation that you're dealing with, something that's happened to you, a neighbor, a friend. And if you would like to share with those individual specific stories tonight, we wouldn't have time to go around the room and hear from every single person tonight, so we're making this an information night. We would love for you to scan this QR code, and when you scan this QR code, there's an opportunity you'll see to select a time and a date where we're going to follow up with you and have a one-on-one meeting to hear from you specifically about what your concern is, specific to your situation. We are going to, at the end of the evening, have tabletops where we're going to hear about just in general, what can we do better as a school system, respond to what you've learned tonight. But we know that many of you may have specific stories that we would love to hear that you want to share with us. So I'm going to pause for 2 minutes right now. If you don't want to sign up, you do not have to, but this QR code is available and you can take a picture with it and sign up later. But again, when you click on this QR code, it will give you the opportunity to sign up directly for a time and a date that you could be available to have a one-on-one meeting with us so that we can really hear and understand from you. So I'm going to pause for 2 minutes, give you a moment, take out your phones if you'd like to, and take a minute to sign up if you would like a follow-up meeting. So then we can begin to get into the discussion of what the work is happening here in APS around what we need to do. And those of you that are watching tonight, you can see the QR code there on your screen. You can take a picture from your screen, and I encourage anyone who's watching tonight, live stream, if you would like a follow-up meeting, please also take a moment to take a picture of this QR code and fill out that request. And we will be following up with you right away on those meetings. All right, thank you. And again, you'll have this with you on your table. So as we move on tonight, I just again want to reaffirm and reestablish why we're here tonight. This is an opportunity for us as a community to come together, one, to learn about some of the work that we are doing, to hear from you about some of the ways of things that we need to do more and give us some feedback on, and also to come together as a community to really condemn all the discrimination and harassment and bullying that's occurring, and make sure that we know as a school system that we have to do more in some of those cases, and we are doing some that we're going to share tonight, but we also understand that this is an ongoing area of focus for us, and we in APS do not tolerate and will not tolerate any form of hate, discrimination, bullying, and harassment. And we know with that, though, means there has to be some actions. So let's talk about what some of those actions are, some of our next steps, and some of the data that you'll hear from some of the things we do look at to understand what are the ways that we can better support you, your students, or to our staff who are here or are watching, also how we can support our staff in making this not just a reactive environment, but a very proactive environment where we're creating the space for children to learn. Something I remember often is when you think about this research that was done many years ago that talked about, our young children are still at a space and a place where we can help them change the future of how they interact with one another if we are beginning to teach them those things. And so it's not just about having the opportunity to say we condemn, we don't support. We actually have to teach what that looks like, and we have to have lessons. And so we do a lot of that through our social emotional learning things we've been doing this year, some of our counseling programs that we have in place, and we have a lot more to do. But thank you for being here tonight to learn, to listen, and to share with us how we can be better at this. We've seen, not only in APS, certainly in APS, but all over the country, around the world, we've seen a rise recently in a lot of very, very inappropriate, disrespectful, unacceptable behavior amongst adults in this world that our students watch and hear. And some of the stuff, when we're investigating some of the things they reported to us, the students don't even know what they're saying to one another. They're hearing and saying things from that they see online or on the news or on TV. They don't even understand what they're actually saying and how harmful and hurtful that is to some of their peers. Others do understand what they're saying, and that's where we have to intervene differently. But it is an ongoing effort. Tonight is just one part of the work that we're doing, and we wanted to be here tonight to kind of make sure that you knew as a community how important this is to us and how it is something that we have to continue to work on. So with that, I want to turn it back to Dr. Crawford, who's going to walk us through and her team some of the information as we listen, and then we'll get a moment at the end of the evening to really engage at tables with some feedback for us. And one last plea, because we definitely want to hear from you if you have individual cases, please use those QR codes if you've not already. Thank you.
Okay. As Dr. Duran mentioned, our goal is to build a safe, inclusive learning environment, and it is foundational in our strategic plan. So without reading, just a reminder that the school board has highlighted student well-being as a critical piece of our strategic plan, and the APS will create an inclusive, safe, and supportive learning environment to foster all aspects of our students' growth. Additionally, we spell out the learning environment is physically and emotionally safe, K-12, and that we offer prevention and intervention services for our students so that they are learning, just like Dr. Duran said, We teach all things, not just our academic subjects, but learning how to address situations and difficult conversations and respecting differences of opinion and engaging in healthy practices. Along the same lines, this year specifically, our school board has identified as a priority deepening our focus on ensuring student well-being and academic progress in healthy, safe, supportive learning environments so that we know each student in Arlington Public Schools by name, strength, and need. So we know that's our charge. We know that's the foundation with strategic plan and board priorities. And then we're going to look at a couple pieces of data, some quantitative and some qualitative, of what we hear from our students. The group may be aware that we survey our students every 2 years with Your Voice Matters survey. So this data is from 2022 because we will be surveying shortly, 2024. And I'll just give you a moment to take a look at this. We have 3 data points that we're going to go through. The first, as you see, is broken out by grades 4 and 5, and then 6 through 12. And the first question, because the print is a little bit small, I will read. During the school year, how often has a student or group of students posted hurtful or threatening things about you on social media or by email? And in this case, favorable means never. So for our grades 4 and 5, we say 85% responding favorably that has never happened to them. When we break that out a little bit more, we see that the favorable, never, is a little bit different by our subgroups. So our students with disabilities are reporting 76% never. Our English learners are 77% never. Our Black students are 81%. And our Hispanic students at 79%. Again, that's our grades 4 and 5. Same question now for grades 6 through 12. We get the same favorable response of never. And in this case, for our secondary students, we don't see the spread that we did at elementary school. So that's just an interesting piece of data that when we broke it out, it was pretty similar across the board at 85%. We now switch it up and go to a different question. Again, I'll read since the print seems a little bit small. If I can, there we go. Okay, on this question, during the school year, how often has a student or group of students called you names or teased you in a way that made you feel uncomfortable, embarrassed, or hurt? And in this case, the never is at 52% for our grades 4 and 5. So that's a pretty big drop off from where we were. We have 17%, as you can see, once, 21% a couple of times, and similar favorable results across our demographics. When we look at 6 through 12, same question, the never is at 69%. 11% responded that this has happened to them, that they have had a student or group of or students called them names, teased in a way that made them feel uncomfortable, hurt, embarrassed. That is at 11% once, 14% a couple times, and again, similar demographics. But we've had a lot of questions recently related to this data point here. And we have, it's even small on my printout. How often do you feel that you are being treated poorly by other students, this is our 4th and 5th grade at the top, because of your race, your ethnicity, your gender, your family's income, religion, disability, or sexual orientation? And at 4th and 5th grade, less than half said never. We do see that 22% responded almost never, 12% once in a while, 10% sometimes, 5% frequently, and 3% almost always. Fairly consistent across the board, except for our students who are Black, who reported 41% never. Then we move 6 through 12, and it's the same prompt. And we have 44% of kids saying never to that. And we have 27% almost never, 13% once in a while, 10% sometimes, 4% frequently, and 2% almost always. And in this case, we have a significant drop-off for our Asian students who reported 32% never and favorable. So we set the stage with saying, we know this is a priority. We know that we have seen that it has to be an emphasis, an explicit instruction in our work. As we look at these data points, you can see we slowly creep down the more we broke out the groups. And it's not okay. It's not where we want to be as a school system who prides ourselves, as Dr. Duran said, on embracing the diversity and everything that that brings to us. So we have some quantitative data from almost 2 years ago. We also have several students who came to us and allowed themselves to be recorded. We have altered their voice, and you'll see you can't see their face to protect their identity. And they shared with us some experiences that they've had with bullying and discriminatory behaviors. While we did shorten the interviews a little bit for time purposes, we really felt it was important to leave the students' words in their words. So I offer that to you. It's hard to listen to. And some of the language, when they're relaying what they've been called, is insensitive, to put it mildly. So I just give you a little bit of a disclaimer as we hear the video from 2 of our students. Oops.
Last year, I got punched, I got shoved, I got verbally abused, people calling me names, people just thinking I was weird because I had autism and ADHD, and I was open about that. There's a group of people who have expressed themselves as homophobic. It turned into something that started being a lot more like a slur, and people calling me slurs, calling me a gay, B word, F word, C word, whore, slut, all of that stuff. They just, it's terrible. Could I have done something to make it different? If I had not expressed my sexuality or the fact that I had ADHD or autism, would I still get hate? Would I get hate for just existing? So, yeah, that's my story.
I wish they would have taken me seriously, not flagged me as being oversensitive or just like overly worried about stuff. They would have taken my concerns to heart and like helped me. I can safely say, like, you don't know someone's story until they tell you themselves, and like I would advise all teachers, not just counselors, to like take these kids seriously. If something happens, it usually has a reason behind it. And even like the whole thing of if you see something, say something. It's cheesy, I know, but it works. You know, check if a person's distressed, or like if they break down, ask them what happened. Just try to get the full picture. Well, honestly, I'm doing pretty well for myself.
I want to thank our students who were brave enough to share their experiences, and also their families for allowing them to come and meet with us and share their stories as well. As I mentioned, it's hard to hear because that's the last thing we want a student to experience. If we're talking about what's the foundation of our strategic plan, how can we support our students, we want them to embrace their individuality and who they are, whatever context that is, as opposed to questioning, would I be teased less? Would I be bullied? Would I be harassed less if I hid who I was and I was not my authentic self? And that's what we've heard from some students lately, and that's why we're here. We're here to share just some foundational information, what our actions are, and then look for feedback related to those actions if there's something that's missing. And as Dr. Duran had said, just a critical piece of if you would like to talk to someone, please use the QR code to sign up. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Daryl Sampson, who's our Executive Director of Student Services at this time.
Good evening. It's great to have an opportunity to speak with you all this evening about this topic that is very important to us in APS, and in particularly to those of us in DEI and student support, because this is really the core of our work together. So we want to first ground ourselves a little bit in what are we talking about. There are a lot of terms that get bandied about. We've got bullying, we've got harassment, we've got mistreatment. You know, we've got a lot of different terms that are out there, and sometimes there's a little bit of overlap, and other times there's very specific criteria or parts of these definitions that we in the schools at least are looking to when we have to think about how we classify certain acts or actions, okay? So first I want to talk a little bit about bullying. So bullying is really any aggressive, unwanted behavior that has these key components to it. It's really the intention is to harm, to intimidate, to threaten. It involves a real or even a perceived power imbalance between the two individuals, or maybe a group of individuals and one individual, where there seems to be one group that has more sort of authority or ability to make decisions over another person. And then it's repeated over time, you know, to the point that it starts to cause some emotional trauma. So that's what we're really thinking about when we think about bullying. It does include cyberbullying, so all of the things that we think about online. There's a lot of discussion about our young people and their use of both positive and negative impacts of things like social media. But it's important to think about that bullying does not include some things like horseplay, you know, one-off teasing that may have occurred, you know, because it doesn't fit into those three buckets up there of these key indicators or markers that we're looking towards. It doesn't mean that there's not an issue. It doesn't mean that we as schools don't need to address it. It just means that we might not call it bullying. So then we have the term harassment, and in educational circles we really think of harassment in two big buckets. So we've got discriminatory harassment, and that's really based on one of these ideas of protected classes, or things like sex, gender, race, religion, marital status, genetic information, all of these things that are really part of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Okay, so if someone is making statements or mistreating someone else, and it's really influenced by, or the intent is, you know, to do this because of one of those classes, then we would have to be thinking about whether that's really discriminatory harassment. Okay, sexual harassment, which is governed by Title IX, and we're all very excited. We have a new Title IX coordinator standing over there, Cedric Ross, and we're all really happy to have him on board. But really, that's talking about things that are very, you know, sexual orientation, gender-based. So it's really those unwelcome sexual advances, requests for favors, or other inappropriate conduct, to include harassment, based upon sex, gender, sexual orientation, and things like that. There's a little bit more than when we think about Title IX and sexual harassment, but that's a really good high-level overview. So that's what we're talking about with harassment. It's really based on one of those key categories, and the actions behind it are motivated by trying to belittle, harm those categories. So then we get to what we call mistreatment. Okay, so mistreatment is really these isolated, individual-type behaviors that by themselves, they're not really something we would call harassment or bullying. Okay, so it can be horseplay, it can be peer conflicts, it can be arguments, and mistreatment over time, particularly if it's repeated, could turn into something that we would think of as bullying. Or if it's really motivated by wanting to belittle someone, or based upon a particular class, like gender, religion, race, something like that, we might think of it ultimately down the road as harassment. But on its surface, on its face, as one individual act that's not contained within others, it's mistreatment. I think we'll get to this slide here. It really talks about this relationship. So we have a lot of actions that are potentially mistreatment. So two kids don't really have challenges, most of the time, but on the playground one day they get into a scuffle. Okay, might be mistreatment. If it's bullying, that's where we sort of see like repeated negative behaviors. We've got those indicators such as power imbalances, such as the fact that they've been repeated and there's that intent to harm. And then in the middle, we have fewer then that would really constitute harassment because they're based upon one of these classes or categories that, you know, from the federal lens really qualifies them as discriminatory or sexual-based harassment. What I want to be clear about is all of these warrant responses. All of these things warrant supports from the schools to try to help students, both those who may be the targets of some of these actions, but also to try to think about how we proactively support the students who may be engaging in these behaviors with some new understanding, some new perspectives, or potentially even how we help them build different ways to socialize with each other and interact with each other. So regardless of whether it's called bullying, whether it's called harassment, whether it's called mistreatment, we do want to be able to support all of the students involved. Okay, and I'll turn this over to Dr. Ty Bird, who is our Executive Director of DEI.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And Kristen and I get an opportunity to speak to lots of colleagues across our division, and every time we do, we thank them for doing their service to our community and for our community. I also want to offer my thanks to you for being here this evening and helping us have this difficult but very important conversation. We greatly appreciate you being here. Okay, so we have been working recently to help codify what hate speech is and looks like in Arlington Public Schools. We thought that it would be important for us to communicate a common understanding of the term hate speech so that we were all on the same sheet of music, so to speak. I'm going to read this to you because I think it's important. It's any form of expression through which speakers intend to vilify, humiliate, or incite hatred against a group or a class of persons on the basis of race, religion, skin color, sexual identity, gender identity, ethnicity, disability, or national origin. We borrowed that from the American Library Association, and recently we met with all of our school principals to share that definition with them so that when we see this, we all begin to act in common ways. There may be some nuanced differences to the approach for each building, but there should be consistency in recognition of it and then addressing of it. So that's our definition for hate speech. Okay, so we consider ourselves the proactive branch of this conversation. Dr. Duran prefaced his statements today by talking about what we're doing proactively to improve interactions between students, between teachers, families, caregivers, and all of the community members who are involved in our schools. So we believe genuinely that when teachers utilize culturally responsive teaching and equitable practices in their classroom, academics will improve and so will social interactions improve. So we want to teach our educators to be prepared to engage in this conversation when they see it. So it is not addressed in this instance, but it is addressed in other instances. We want it to always be addressed when it is seen. So our first strategy was to mandate level 1 of implicit bias training for every member of the APS staff. That is from transportation to the school board. Everyone is being given what we're calling level 1, phase 1 knowledge transfer of implicit bias so that we are all aware that biases live and exist inside each and every one of us. And if we don't manage those biases, they become prejudices, stereotypes, we begin to discriminate, and we could eventually become hateful. So we want to ensure that our staff is in recognition of these things in themselves and in the children that they support in the classrooms on a daily basis. Again, believing that when they do this, students perform at higher levels. We also are moving into what we're calling phases 2 and 3. Phase 1 is mandatory. Phase 2 is voluntary, and it's an individual change in behavior. So colleagues who enlist in phase 2 are taking a year-long journey where they've taken an implicit association test to identify if they have a bias or biases. Then they begin to consider how that bias might have built up in them over time, and then what are they going to do purposefully to change that dynamic? While that bias might always be there, you can manage it, such as it does not have detrimental impacts on your relationships with your students or your colleagues. And then lastly, change in institutional behavior. That's the third phase of this conversation, and we're going to work with every department in APS to ensure that implicit biases are not a part of their policies, a part of their practices, and a part of their beliefs. We're also making ourselves available in our office to every principal in the division to have what we're calling a hate speech conversation. So we want to go to each school and do a survey of their staff and of their students to find out what level of awareness do they have about that definition. Now that you've seen the definition, how frequently are you seeing it? Are you aware of it in your setting? And then how confident are you that you're ready to engage the students when you see and hear it? Because what we've heard from some of our colleagues is that they're not 100% certain how to respond when they hear it. We want to remove that discomfort and help them be aggressive in reaching and engaging students when they see it. Also with our students, do they know what hate speech is? What's the definition of it? Do they know when they see it? And are they aware of how often or how frequently it occurs to them and to others in their setting? Then we're going to work together to develop and implement interventions at every building. Every building is at a different place with this conversation. We want to meet them where they are and provide them with the supports to move further. And then we're going to monitor our progress towards our goals of eliminating hate speech in our buildings. And then at the end of the year, we'll do an inventory at the end to find out how far we've moved that ball in that building. And then every year, we'll continually engage in this conversation until we've eradicated it in our school system. And then a reflection and our next steps will be based on those outcomes. Okay, next I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Carrie Hirsch, who is the Director of Teaching and Learning, or Curriculum Instruction. There we go.
The name changes a lot.
That's yours too.
Thank you. So one of the things that in the Office of Academics is that we partner closely with a lot of our colleagues in diversity, equity, inclusion, and student support. And something that we're constantly looking at in the Office of Academics is curricular review. And we want to ensure that every student can see themselves in the curriculum and that they also learn multiple perspectives so that they can see people like them and they can learn the experiences of those who are different than them as well. And so we take a few different approaches as we think about curriculum and as it relates to inclusion and reducing bullying. One is thinking about guidance for staff, and some of the key aspects of that are really creating a classroom climate from day one that supports civil discourse in the classroom. And so if teachers and students practice these skills and it becomes routine, when some difficult issues arise, those behaviors are really already embedded in the classroom, and so stressful situations don't become bigger issues. One of the other key pieces of guidance that we give to staff is to ensure that their classroom lessons are really grounded in the Virginia Standards of Learning and the APS curriculum. And so ensuring that there's those content connections to any classroom dialogue can really help students see the purpose of that learning in the context of the broader context. The other piece here is that in addition to the Virginia Standards of Learning, teachers really also need to be thinking about the skills that students are learning as they're engaging with that content. And so partnering with student support and thinking about those social emotional learning skills that also tie to a lot of the Virginia Standard of Learning content skills help students build strategies and tools in their toolbox to deal with some of the difficult concepts and conversations that they might be having with their peers or perhaps with teachers or staff members. As I said, we frequently partner with the Office of DEI as well. And so as we do our ongoing curricular review, we bring in their expertise. And so having them engaged in panels when we're looking at our curriculum to ensure that we're not just teaching the same concepts because we've always taught them. We need to really rethink sometimes what we're teaching, look at those contents, make sure that they're grounded in standards, but that we're also centering the humanity of the people who we're talking about and who we're learning about, including those multiple perspectives. We've partnered, in addition, across multiple content areas with DEI to create teaching guidance around particularly sensitive units or topics, not only in social studies and English classes, but in other areas where they might pop up as well. And then thirdly, we think it's really important that teachers engage in ongoing professional learning. One approach that we take is content academies. And so when teachers feel confident in the content that they're teaching, they can be a lot more agile when different topics might crop up that cause a little bit more discomfort in the classroom. So just like having those routines, classroom routines set up, having that confidence in your content knowledge can allow you to be flexible. So that's one approach. The other is through our Social Studies Office and the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, we have been over the past couple of years and ongoing running teaching sensitive topics and current events. This professional learning helps teachers learn these strategies that they should be embedding in their classroom, how they open up space and time when sensitive topics do occur or current events pop up that they might have to address. And so while our focus on academics is that content and that learning, it's really important that we help partner with our colleagues to ensure that teachers have those tools that they need to facilitate these difficult conversations in their classrooms. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Sampson.
So that's a perfect segue. Thank you, Ms. Hirsch. To talk about another strategy that we're employing within APS is really our focus on social emotional learning and trying to build some of these key competencies in our students, which can include things like social skills, social relationships, so that students better understand how to positively engage with each other, as well as self-efficacy, understanding how they can engage with adults in appropriate ways. I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago in the Post that was talking about stress in students and really talking about the long-term impacts of the pandemic from students being at home, not always necessarily having a lot of that social interaction during some of these developmental years as they would typically have, and that it is a little bit more difficult that we're seeing in our students. It's a little bit more difficult for some of them to be able to form some of those relationships. So we really want to make sure that we're helping our students develop these clear and concrete skills, but also helping them to make goals, meet goals, and sort of be able to fulfill sort of their post-secondary aspirations. All of that fits into the SEL bucket. So we're really trying to do that in a way where, during the school day, both for explicit time for instruction, where they have really focused time on social emotional learning skills, but then also as teachers can affirm or provide additional opportunities within their content areas, like you just heard about from academics. We're really trying to make sure that they're getting opportunities to learn and practice and build skills in these areas all throughout the day. Okay, we really do believe that it is important for everyone in the schools to be engaged in this work, to be providing that explicit instruction for students. But we also want to make sure that we are incorporating the voices of our students, particularly at the high school level, within some of these materials and lessons so that it's relevant for our students and that they feel like they have a voice in helping to design some of that instruction as well as potentially even help to co-lead that. And we've had some really good opportunities at some of our high schools for our students to do just that. Okay, our schools are using some very specific curricular resources to impart social emotional learning that have a lot of research and evidence behind them. So we are trying to make sure that we aren't just throwing random things at the wall and hoping that they'll stick, but that we're using some really clear resources and materials that are known to help our students be able to build some of these skills. And then a strategy that we have is we have a lot of people within our school buildings that can assist students, okay, that can help them if they need a little bit more support in building some of those skills, practicing some of those social skills with people, or who they can go to when they're really challenged by situations that may be mistreatment or bullying or harassment of some kind. So we can do individual work with kids, we can do small group work with kids, which is another great way to have students practice some of these pro-social skills with their peers. But we have all of these personnel, your counselors, your social workers, your psychologists. We have intervention counselors this year at the secondary level. All of these people are deans. All of these people are available in our schools to provide sort of that next layer of assistance if our students need it. A final strategy that I want to talk about coming up the next slide is that we want to harness the power of our students themselves to take action and to be able to come up with ways that they can work to create this positive school climate where they can work together to intervene if they see someone being bullied, where they have the opportunity to say, no, that's not appropriate, or I'm going to stand up for this student. And so we have a couple of examples from our students in some of our schools where they are actively, as kids, you know, taking some of the ownership of this and some of this responsibility.
Carlos, what does Long Branch do to prevent bullying?
They have a month that's called Bullying Prevention Month. You can wear orange, and that's for that you agree that people shouldn't get bullied in school.
One of the school mottos, which is "Can't say you can't play," so it helps kids to feel included at recess when they are new here or they don't have like many good friends here, and they just really need like something to do. And so the motto really helps kids like think like, oh, you know, they can play. Like we can play with them.
We have a buddy bench outside, and the buddy bench is near the playground where most kids play. And so if you see someone sitting there alone, you can ask if they want to play with them. We also have Captain Compassion, which is a comic that kids voice. We put it in the morning news, and it says what to do in a situation.
Kid Kinder, good to see you. Two siblings, Zoe and Ari, saw someone being bullied today at camp and are regretting that they didn't speak up. Can you help them activate their upstander power?
I'm on it!
At Swanson, there are a lot of ways to make people feel welcome.
My world geography class, because the teacher makes us feel like we're all equals, and like in that class we can just all be friends, even if we're not friends outside of our class. So it feels like a community, and I really like that.
Recently I met a teacher named Miss Stallworth who really helped me connect with a lot of my friends, offering me to make a little lunch group. And that made me feel really welcome, because then I could invite all my friends to a little lunch group that can help me wind down from all of these classes.
So I joined the cheer team in the fall, and it was really eye-opening to me because I made a lot of connections with people that I never thought I would before. And so like I made friends who were in different friend groups that I would like not talk to normally, and like kids who were younger and stuff. And so that was really cool, because if I hadn't had the opportunity, then I never would have known them, and like I never would have had that great experience.
Schools are mainly for education, not bullying. So that's the main fact of why this video is being recorded.
I love that bit at the end. School is for education, is not for bullying. I also may make, I'm on it, my motto moving forward. So I love hearing from our kids who are actively participating and trying to prevent bullying and to make a difference in their schools and take on that positive school climate for themselves. Because I think for us, the message to our staffs, to our students, to all of us in central office has continued to be, this is all of our responsibilities. So it can't just fall to one group, it has to really fall to all of us to make sure that our students are having access to safe environments where they can show up as who they are. So we've gotten a lot of questions, and we wanted to make sure that we really address this in this presentation about how do I report bullying or something I think may be bullying. I don't even know what it is, but I'm pretty sure like this, you know, this could be something that is concerning or concerning behavior for a student. Okay. So we've tried to really simplify this to the extent possible, and so we would encourage all of you. We have an APS bullying and harassment report form that is on the website, at our bullying prevention website. Okay, it is a QR code here. We're also working to get these QR codes in all of our schools so that they can be placed in many places to encourage our students to be able to report if they have something that they've seen that they're worried about with a peer or themselves. Or, as a family member, you can email a brand new email address for us in APS, the report at apsva.us. And again, report anything that is concerning to you, anything that you've heard, the kids that have said some things, because then we are going to be able to take that and we'll make sure it gets to the appropriate place, whether it's the school, whether it's to another department within central office. But we want to make sure that that is one easy to remember email address where families can report something that's concerning. We want to make it as easy for families and the community as possible. And then another way that families can report is to contact the school counselor, the school principal, or an assistant principal who might be a grade level administrator for that student, or the dean of students. You can always reach out to those people and say, I've noticed this about my student. Are you able to follow up, or is there something that you can do? And they'll be able to follow up with you pretty directly as to sort of what they're able to do and then what the next steps will be. I do want to highlight that if it is a specific report or concern about sex or gender-based harassment, you can also report those directly to Cedric Ross, who is our Title IX coordinator for APS, because again, that has a little bit of a different flow to it in terms of follow-up. Okay, so what happens after you report? Okay, so following the Virginia model policy around bullying prevention, you know, and a recent law that came into play starting July 1, once we receive that report and get that to the school will follow up with you in 24 hours to say, we have gotten the report. Like, we need to be able to acknowledge that families have, that we have gotten that information and that we are following up with that. That is required under Virginia law. Okay? Then, within 2 days of that confirmation, we need to follow up with you. Okay? Now, goal would be that we would be able to do, you know, a little bit of an investigation and come back to you with information that says, this is what we've found. Okay? This is what we found. This is what we're going to do. But they may also say, we are still investigating and we think we'll have this done by, and be able to provide you with a timeline. Okay? Sometimes situations are more complex. Sometimes there are more people involved and it may just take a little bit more time than 2 days. Okay? But again, we want to make sure that we are keeping families up to date and that we are making sure that you have that communication. Okay? At the conclusion of the investigation, whenever that is, okay, all of the parties that have been notified and involved in this, you know, will receive a summary of what was found and then any action steps and supportive measures. So again, I want to come back to, even if it's not something that is found to be bullying or found to be harassment, there can still be things that as a school division we are doing to support that child, you know, because that child's experience is their reality. You know, so just because it's not called bullying doesn't mean it doesn't still have an impact on that student, and we want to make sure that we're trying to help them work through that to the best we can. I do want to again point out there are different timelines for sort of that follow-up under Title IX. So sometimes those will be a little bit different if it happens to be sex or gender-based harassment. Then on your tables, you should have found a really brief summary that we hope clarifies some of this easily for families, and a pretty quick and easy summary document about how to report, then what happens next, and then what happens at the end of the investigation. So we have these for you here now. They're also going to be on our website, and they will be in English, as well as Amharic, Arabic, Mongolian, and Spanish, okay, at the Bullying Prevention website. So we want to make sure that our communities have an easy one-page document that can assist them in where to go and what to expect. Okay. And I will turn this back over to Dr. Crawford.
All right, thank you. As we talk about leading safe, inclusive learning environments, of course, we want to highlight safety and school safety overall. So just a moment to share that we do have a school safety office under Ms. Graves' Department of School Support. Our secondary schools have school safety coordinators, SSCs. Our secondary schools have lead SSCs, and then SSCs specifically. Our elementaries have floaters. They have connections, of course, to our SSCs from the secondary school. And our school safety coordinators do receive training, and extensive training in particular in de-escalation. So you may be familiar with nonviolent crisis prevention intervention, or CPI, and that is an area that our SSCs are trained in. Additionally, we do have a very, very strong, clear MOU with Arlington Police Department. And if that's of interest to you, it is posted on the school safety website if you wanted to look at any of the details there. I will just say we have a wonderful director of school safety and emergency management, Erin Queen, who happens to be here tonight, right over there in the red. And we do always want to specify that Erin is a longtime Arlington employee, joining us this year in the director position, but previously many years as an Arlington police officer. We have a very strong relationship with the Arlington Police Department, and Erin's a wonderful liaison to that. We work very collaboratively and as proactively as possible to make sure that our schools are safe places. Also just wanted to note that when we do have situations, and they run the gamut, right? We might have a medical situation where we need to call 911 for something. A student fell on the playground and broke their arm. We have a situation where a fire alarm trips by accident. Any of the cases where we need police, fire, 911 for medical, ambulance, etc. Schools do complete serious incident reports that are turned into our department so that we're able to keep the superintendent and the school board abreast of anything that is going on. All right, action steps. So we've talked about these as we've gone along. Dr. Sampson just highlighted one of our main things is we do feel that when we have had acts, whether it is discriminatory in nature or bullying, we find that they may be underreported, right? So that's why we're pushing the reporting. We want to make sure that we're aware of what is going on so that we can address them. You have the QR code, we've got the email, we will be putting the QR code around schools, making sure that whether it's staff, families, students, that they are reporting any bullying and harassment, and those systems are in place to ensure timely investigation. We also, as I mentioned, or actually Dr. Bird talked about addressing hate speech, and that is a very detailed presentation that he's done with all of our school administrators and our central office administrators, and we're continuing then to roll that out to the schools, but administrators across the board have had some of that learning. We will be doing a policy review and our procedures very specifically to our non-discrimination as well as bullying and harassment to see where can we tighten up that language, whether that's timeline or accountability and communication. We mentioned the reporting, and then in the last few months, our students have been engaging in civic activities, which is allowed per our policy, but it raised a lot of questions, right? If you're a secondary parent, you've probably received a message from us where we'll say, there may be a walkout, but it's not school-sponsored. What does that mean since it happened during the school day? How does that get planned? Or is it student-led, et cetera? So we are updating the guidance on student actions related to civic activities, including student walkouts. What's the student responsibility? And then it outlines staff expectations and working with their school administration. And that will be public. Additionally, as I mentioned, we have our Your Voice Matters survey administration that we'll do this spring. And so we'll be able to do some comparisons of how have we done in the last 2 years since we administered the survey. We are continuing to develop resources and documents. There's always new information coming out, and that's something that we work closely with academics to make sure that our teachers have the most up-to-date information, whether it's SEL or academic specific. And when we looked at some of our information that we shared and some of our area school systems, we saw that we didn't have a guidance document on respecting religious diversity in our schools. So that is in progress, and Dr. Bird and team are taking the lead on that. We have also had conversations about how do we expand our programming, whether that is the Upstander program that you heard about, whether developing stronger allyships in schools, best buddies for our students with disabilities, without disabilities, and exploring unified champion schools. Across the board, we are looking at increasing the use of our restorative practices and partnering with our community organizations. So what we are hoping to do next, because we've been talking a lot at you, we would love to have you, and I'll give you the prompts in a second, talk at your tables to give us some feedback. And then after we engage in that, the question will be, well, what are they going to do with that? How do we know what the whole group said? So we will be taking the information that you all provide and synthesizing your responses, looking for trends, areas that we can improve upon, things you agreed with, things you didn't hear, and then communicating next steps to you through that. This also wanted to take the opportunity, of course, to plug that there's lots of opportunities to engage with the school system and with the county in Arlington. So just a few are highlighted here. Our Advisory Council on Teaching and Learning, known as ACTL, our Special Ed Advisory Committee, ASAC, our Student Services. We love our acronyms, right? We have SHAB, we have School Health Advisory Board, we've got SEPTA for Special Ed PTA, and the County Council PTA as well. So just some different opportunities out there to engage. This will be posted and shared, so we want to make sure that you had our contact information in case there are any follow-up questions that you want to reach out to us. We've got an email and a phone number for our department. And before I go to the debrief, there we go. If you have the time, if you are able to complete a survey or just a couple questions, I think it's like 3 questions, to give us some feedback on tonight's event, we would appreciate it. So at this time, we are, thank you. We are going to stop our live streaming because we're going to break up and do some table talk. So thank you if you've been joining us online. Please also do your exit ticket. But we are going to talk at our tables with these 3 questions. What did you hear or learn that you felt was positive? What did we miss that we need to consider? And what ideas do you have to continue to support as we look at creating safe, secure learning environments? Our goal tonight was to tell you what's the foundation, what are we doing right now, and really not stand before you and say, yeah, everything's perfect, and pat ourselves on the back. We know that it's not, and we know that we need to respond to the challenges that we're hearing from our students to make sure that they feel safe and secure and they feel that they can be themselves in school and totally focused on their learning and not have to worry about all of these other outside factors. So one comment I would just make before we break up at our tables is we are heavy over here. So we do have some other tables if you'd like to spread out. We also have the tables out in the town hall area, but if we're all together, it might get a little bit loud. So please feel free to spread out over here, or you can move out to the tables over there. And we're going to stop our recording, but we're also not going to come back together as a large group. We'd like to have you take your time and talk at your table, and then once you're able to get your information, we'll be done from there. Okay? All right, every table will have a staff member too, in case there's any questions. We all have our name tags on with our little blue outline that should show you that we are APS.